Weeks after my first SARS-2 infection, I developed cognitive issues, constant dizziness, shooting pains, post-exertional malaise, and postural hypotension. My first seizure was the exclamation point at the end of a month-long COVID migraine after my second SARS-2 infection. Through pacing and staying in bed, I learned that I could manage some of my symptoms. After 2 years of doctor's visits, I was finally diagnosed with post-acute sequelae of COVID. Despite being on a cocktail of stabilizing drugs, I still experience all of my long COVID symptoms and sleep most of the day. As an acupuncturist and herbalist, I have helped myself and others with long COVID, but only in small ways. If there were a cure through acupuncture supplements, I would not have long COVID. The reason I'm here is to talk about viral persistence. We used to think viral persistence was rare until January 23, when Ghaffari and Lithgow's team found a high incidence of patients remaining infectious via nasopharyngeal swab for at least 2 months. Then, David Walt's team found circulating spike in patients up to a year after infection, indicating active replicating reservoirs in long COVID patients. It was during this time the White House announced that they beat COVID and would end the emergency declaration. They kicked 23 million people off Medicaid and other increasingly necessary services as more of us became disabled. Last month, Fargo and McComsey's team proposed that the bone marrow reservoirs found in SARS-2 convalescents are hijacking the innate immune system by infecting hematopoietic stem cells. SARS-2 infected macrophages take residence in organs throughout the body for months, causing JAK-STAT-dependent inflammation, mitochondrial, and metabolic dysfunction. What this means is our immune systems and our bodies are really struggling, and we are deathly tired all the time. Right now, David Petrino is trialing HIV antivirals that have shown promise as CCR5 antagonists for long COVID. Michael Peluso is studying reservoirs in people living with long COVID and influencing clinical trials of monoclonal antibodies and combination antiviral drugs. These are the kinds of studies and trials that should have been done years ago by the NIH and industry partners. Infection-associated chronic illness is not new. There are tens of millions not with us today, including those disproportionately affected by severe long COVID. Women, Black, Indigenous, people of color, our trans loved ones. Subject to continual SARS-2 reinfection, anyone could meet a similar fate within the next few years, be it long COVID, COVID-induced Parkinson's, and dementia, heart disease, kidney disease. Millions more families will be forced into poverty and houselessness due to disability, while the U.S. government funds universal health care and housing in already wealthy countries. What we need is nothing short of a warp speed initiative approving Social Security and medications for long COVID. That must include cash in the hands of every person the government disabled. Every person the government chose to disable and chose to abandon during an ongoing pandemic. Worse than abandon, the White House directed the CDC, employers, schools, and hospitals to violate the Public Health Services Act and the ADA, an outright attack on civil rights. To those in power deluded by corporatist and election-driven efforts to minimize SARS-2 and Long COVID and defend this brutalist experiment, you will never hear the end of this. Stop destroying lives.